This week, The Guardian released a cartoon of the BBC chairman, which was widely condemned as anti-Semitism, and they apologised for it immediately. Andrew Bridgen, a Conservative MP, was expelled from the Conservative Party for anti-Semitism. Diane Abbott, a Labour MP, was suspended from the Labour Party from anti-Semitism. This was all in the past week. What does this tell you?
It tells you that nobody but nobody can be complacent about anti-Semitism in British society. And I think that, as I said a few moments ago, that we as a community had become very complacent and very smug about our place in British society. If a newspaper as mainstream as The Guardian can publish a cartoon like that, the most horrendous cartoon, after all of this debate about anti-Semitism on the left, remember that, all the debate over the last 4 or 5 years because of Corbyn about anti-Semitism on the left, it is extraordinary. And where's the accountability? Who's being held to account? Admittedly, they immediately apologised, they withdrew it from their site, but how could they have allowed this? How can they think like that? You see, that's the problem. How can Diane Abbott think like anti-Semitism is not the same for a kind of racism and racism against travellers and Irish people as other forms of racism? It's exposing the way these people think. Yeah. Not just the way they act. And the way they think, let's be clear about this, is that anti-Semitism is somehow some second-class form of racism. It's not quite as serious and as bad as racism against other minorities. So the Jewish community has got to be very robust and assertive, as it has been in recent years, the leadership of the community, to be fair, but it's also got to forge alliances with those in all political parties who are opposed to anti-Semitism and strident about fighting anti-Semitism, and all other minority communities who are the victims of racism as well. Because we should remember this, there are other minorities who also suffer horrendous racism in our society. And I want to say, final thing is, the local Conservative Party, we know that the leader of the Conservatives in Bury promoted a gentleman to become his chief whip, who was guilty of peddling anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Right? That's what happened. That's a fact. And we also know that a gentleman called Shami Raja, who was expelled from the Conservative Party, is still organising candidates for them to fight these local elections in Manchester, behind the scenes and privately. So it's not just about the left either. Anti-Semitism is a problem in all sections of British society, as are other forms of racism. We thought that we'd made tremendous progress on these issues of racism and anti-Semitism in our society. We all thought that, yeah? And when I take a step back and reflect on what's being exposed, I actually think we haven't made anywhere near as much progress as we thought.
Is this a stark warning of what the UK could be if we don't stop all this?
It's a stark warning if we ever believe that it's sorted, that we're fine, that these attitudes and beliefs don't exist. As I say, what worries me is that Diane Abbott believes what she put in her article, that the Guardian cartoonist believes that that sort of characterisation of Richard Sharp is acceptable. That's what really concerns me. What this is flushing out is what they really think and believe. Okay? And they do actually, a lot of mainstream thinkers believe that somehow Jews are basically rich, they're powerful, they tend to be white, and therefore the idea that they are victims of anti-Semitism. And what staggers me is the Holocaust was not that long ago. Man's greatest inhumanity to man. It wasn't that long ago. In a very civilised, inverted commas, sophisticated society where Jews thought they'd been accepted at the highest levels of that country. So, you know, I've been contacted recently by a ex-local councillor, won't say which party, it's irrelevant, who said, oh, Diane Abbott is only a minor thing, we shouldn't blow it up out of all proportion, we shouldn't keep going on about anti-Semitism, it doesn't do us any good. I completely reject that approach. We have to be assertive, we have to be strong, and we have to, as I say, forge alliances with those in society who genuinely believe in a zero-tolerance approach to racism. And we also have to remember that there are other minorities who suffer this sort of racism as well, and where we can, we ought to work with them. I'm talking about now the Jewish community.
I mean, we did have on David Silvergan, that's why I had a debate with him on the panel about that.
Yeah, for me, this completely, I just fundamentally disagree with that. Keep your heads down. Don't suggest it's a major problem. It is a major problem, and putting our heads down, burying our heads in the sand is not the way to deal with it. Really isn't.
Yeah, I would agree. There's anti-Semitism in all parts of politics. I'd like to think the Conservative Party have not sort of tolerated racists within the highest echelons, and
So,
that,
and
as it
Andrew
was-
Bridgen was
as it
a
was under
Conservative
as it
MP
was
that
under
got
Corbyn.
that got expelled
Yeah,
this
well,
week.
he got expelled.
Yeah, but it still happened.
It still happened,
Yeah.
and I don't deny it still
Is
happened.
Mr Rogers
And
still
the-
organising candidates for the Conservative Party, even though he's been thrown out for anti-Semitism?
I can't discuss individuals, and I can't say exactly who's doing what. But
If this was Corbyn's Labour Party, there would be outrage.
well, Shamraj is suspended from the Conservative Party, and that is the.
No, he's been expelled, Arnold.
He's been expelled.
But he's still organising all your candidates to stand in Manchester at these local elections,
Well,
as you know, probably.
Well, that's not something I want to comment on, because there's nothing official, and as far as the party is concerned, he's expelled, and that's the end of it.
Right, so if there was anti-Semitism within your party, would you feel obliged to stand up and say that can't happen?
Well, of course we do.
So if this person, you said you can't comment on whether, but if he is helping out unofficially, and he's done quite, like we talked about, quite anti-Semitic things, do you think it's right for you to stand up and say, no, that's not right, and speak out against him?
It's a very complex situation. I don't know the full facts, and
I mean, as far as I see it, if there's anti-Semitism, then you stop it. If there isn't, then you don't.
As I said, it's not something I can really comment on. But I just want to come back to the
Sure.
to the
Substantive.
substantive issue, as it were. There is anti-Semitism in both parties. I agree with what Ivan said about both Andrew Bridgen and Andrew Bridgen has got form on all sorts of things. I think
There was two things. There was anti-Semitism and there was lobbying.
And there's
COVID.
Lobbying.
I think there was COVID comment.
Yes,
COVID,
he
yeah.
compared Holocaust to COVID
yeah,
vaccines.
yeah, he's got form. He's obviously a strange. I don't know him. I know a lot of the Conservative MPs. I don't know him. I mean, he's not someone I've met at Conservative Friends of Israel events or anything like that. So I don't really know him, and I can't really comment. But I think it's the right thing that's happened. In terms of Diane Abbott, I just want to say a little bit more to build on what Ivan said. As you know, I'm a little bit involved in the press industry. I've written for the Jewish Telegraph for many, many years, and I helped my son Yossi with his Jewish Weekly.
Which is a great paper.
Thank you. So I know a little bit about the way papers work, and these are local papers, national papers probably even more so. Ivan says that the cartoonist, is unbelievable. He thinks that. I would go further, because papers don't just allow things to,
They have to go through several.
They have to go through several.
Of course. Absolutely,
hoops.
I agree.
There's a sub-editor, there's a proofreader, and anything that's even remotely controversial would probably end up on the editor's desk, and if not, it should do. So this just isn't one cartoonist. This is a whole culture in the Guardian that this was let through. The case of Diane Abbott.
Wait a second, it can't be the Guardian. They're anti-woke.
Yeah, in the case of Diane Abbott, she's a one-off. So, she obviously, I presume, she didn't run her article by Keir Starmer or anyone from the.
No,
party.
this is what she believes.
She actually
this is what she
said
believes.
that it was just a draft.
She said it was a
Yeah,
draft.
it was just a draft.
Which is
But
beyond
the
beyond belief, by the
the
way.
Observative print. Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
I'm a very small cog in the Conservative Party, right? If I was to write an article for the paper, strictly speaking, I'm supposed to submit it to the Conservative Party, to the press office. I mean, very often you get away with it, and it's it's observed more in the brief. But strict rules are you're supposed to, And when I was in the army as a chaplain, my goodness, you wouldn't dream of writing something without running it by the press office or what have you. So there is a lot more than this as far as that's concerned. Diane Abbott.
I want to be clear. I was in politics for a long time, Arnold. Backbench MPs do not run their articles past the leader's office or anyone else senior in the party. Certainly, members of the shadow cabinet or the cabinet would be required to do that. Okay, but backbench MPs being controlled by the machine, a lot of them wouldn't accept that. Certainly, the Diane Abbotts of this world, and it just doesn't happen, Arnold. So to suggest it could have done is just not the case.
Okay, no,
Right. So if you're in the cabinet or the shadow cabinet, you would have to get the party's approval. But backbench MPs don't do that, and they don't have to.
Okay, no, that's fine. But she's got form in all sorts of
Yeah.
ways, and she's quite a strange individual. The fact that she's an MP for Hackney, although I think it's Hackney South, but still. But again, you know, Keir Starmer is taking action these days in a way that under Jeremy Corbyn that didn't happen. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
But wearing my rabbi's yarmulke, I would say...
How do you feel about us as a community? Do you agree that we have to be assertive, that we can't be complacent, that this is actually more serious than we'd ever imagined?
No, I absolutely do. And wearing my rabbi's yarmulke, I'm never surprised by anti-Semitism. I mean,
that's a really bad thing.
I'm disappointed, don't get me wrong, and I'm upset. I'm never totally surprised.
Sure.
You know, you look at the Talmud and so on, it tells us all the time that anti-Semitism is rife and almost will never be completely conquered.
Correct.
You know, till the end of days, the Messiah comes, whatever you want to call it. So I'm never totally shocked. There's a lot of people, I see people who interact with me in the street or wherever. They don't necessarily say anything anti-Semitic, but I get vibes that, you know, they don't like me, then they don't like Jews. I can't explain it and I can't report it because there's nothing to report, but you do get that impression. Because I think Jews suffer in a double way. One, with Jews, and anti-Semitism is the oldest hatred. The other one is that most Jews are white. Not all Jews, but most Jews are white. So we don't even get the sympathy that some people have, you know, for other minorities, because we're white. So as Diane Abbott said, white people can't be.
But also, Rabbi, do you agree that Jewish people should not be racist themselves, that they should apply this consistently to other minorities? And sometimes we hear people saying things in our own community which is totally unacceptable, and we should call that out whenever we hear it.
I do agree. I think it's happening less and less.
Yeah, but it's not acceptable. I'll just say something positive. So I told you a few weeks ago at the story of I walk up and down Very Old Road with the rabbi to shul on a Shabbat, and we got an egg thrown at us and it just missed us. I told you that story, but I need to tell you another story. What's happened a lot recently is we're walking Very Old and young people passing us say shalom. Now, you might say, well, does that mean anything? It does actually, because they're saying that in a positive way. Yeah. A rabbi is visibly, I mean, he's a rabbi, you know, and I have my kippah on. And so there's also that angle to this as well that I would want to balance.
Oh, you mean non-Jewish people?
Yes, yeah, in a very nice, friendly way.
Yeah.
So that has to be said. You know, so that's the other side of the story.
I know that's right.
And that's why we need to build alliances with people outside our community, decent, civilised people. A lot of people in Britain in the last general election could not bring themselves to vote Labour, who'd voted Labour all their life. And a part of that reason was because they didn't like the anti-Semitism. So there is something to build on there. You know, it's not that everybody's against the Jewish community, but we can't afford to be complacent.
I would agree with that. I mean, I've been the victim of anti-Semitism many, many times, well documented. I've had eggs thrown at me. One or two that were thrown at me did land.
And that wasn't your congregants?
That wasn't my congregants, nor was it my constituents. I've had eggs thrown at my car. I've had graffiti written on my car in snow and all sorts of things. I've had things thrown at the house. And I've been punched in the face outside my synagogue. And many, many times, even the last month, I've heard anti-Semitic remarks. You know, where I live, on a main road, you see cars coming up and down the road shouting. Very recently, and I mean really recently, in the last couple of weeks, heard somebody shouting "Free Palestine" at me.
I've had that, yeah.
But it's worse than that. It's more than "Free Palestine." You know, shouting really anti-Semitic things.
Yeah.
You know, but yes, as Ivan says, I've got many friends and acquaintances who you wouldn't expect to be. You wouldn't expect them to be anti-Semitic, but you wouldn't expect them to be great friends of the Jews. And they say the most incredible thing again. Well, some of them, you know, spoke about Corbyn, and I wouldn't dream of voting for Corbyn, and so on. Even people who have very little to do with Jews, they were discussing about it.
I mean, it needs to be said that Rabbi Saunders has been a successful politician. He has depended on a lot of support in terms of party workers and activists stuffing leaflets and putting things through us who are not Jewish, and voters voting who are not Jewish. And for my whole political life, nearly 30 years it was, local and national, the people who did all the work to get me elected, the vast majority of them were non-Jewish people who knew that I was a proud Jew and strong in my Jewish identity. So we should remember that as well.